Hello and welcome. I'm Rafael Bernal, staff writer at The Hill. Thank you for joining us today for the second session of our timely and important discussion on diversity and inclusion. We have some terrific conversations lined up. Joining me for this hour of programming is my colleague Julia Manchester, The Hill's political reporter, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, Gilead and the Rockefeller Foundation, for their support of today's event. Before we get underway, a quick reminder, you can tweet us at The Hill Events using the hashtag #TheHillDiversity. We are broadcasting live, and we will be taking your questions throughout the program. And as with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video, and refreshing the page in most cases should fix the problem. So my first guest this hour is, I'm very happy to see him, is former Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo. During his time in Congress, Representative Curbelo co-founded the Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus and served on the Ways and Means Committee. Congressman Curbelo, thank you for joining me today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to see you virtually. I miss seeing you in person. We saw each other on a weekly basis for 4 years, so it's great to be reunited here.
Yeah, it's been too long. And during those 4 years, you were ranked. Speaking of fours, you were ranked the fourth most bipartisan member of the House until you returned to the private sector in 2019. Looking at how things have changed in Congress on the bipartisanship front since you left, what would be your message today to your former colleagues and the new members who've since joined?
Well, the place, believe it or not, is even less functional or more dysfunctional than it used to be. Almost unanimously, my former friends that still remain there tell me that it's just a difficult place to work. A bad environment. At first, I used to think they were just trying to make me feel better by telling me I wasn't missing anything, but I'm really starting to believe them because they say it with a great deal of sincerity. And of course, so many challenges have arisen since I left the Congress in January of 2019. The most dramatic of those was obviously the attack on the Capitol on the 6th of January. So I would just encourage all my former colleagues to keep doing whatever they can to lower the volume, to try to build meaningful relationships that'll help reestablish trust in the institution, and equally as important for the American people, move an agenda that both parties can agree on. And there are some opportunities. I mean, there's a bipartisan infrastructure bill that's been passed by the Senate and awaiting action in the House. And certainly there are members that are still deeply committed to bipartisan action. They're being attacked for it. Kyrsten Sinema, Joe Manchin on the Democratic side. A lot of good Republicans like Brian Fitzpatrick, John Katko, and others. They just have to keep working hard at it and trying to fix the place because so far it's not really working out for the American people.
So you mentioned January 6th. I can't let go of that point since you mentioned it. What do you think? Congress is trying, part of Congress rather, is trying to get to the bottom of what happened that day. You know, what is missing in that investigation? You know, looking out from the outside in.
Well, what's missing is that John Katko had negotiated a deal with House Democrats to have a bipartisan commission, a truly nonpartisan process controlled equally by both parties, where both parties could call witnesses and together get to the bottom of what happened, because this shouldn't be a partisan exercise. We should want to do everything we can to prevent future attacks on the Capitol of the United States or in any government building. But unfortunately, that effort was undermined by House Republican leadership. And, now we have a committee with some Republican representation. And thankfully, there are two Republicans who are willing to serve on that committee. And thankfully, Speaker Pelosi was willing to invite those Republicans to serve. But it's not ideal. We shouldn't politicize this, just like politicizing 9/11 would have been a major mistake back then. Some people tried to do that. But cooler heads prevailed, and there was a commission, a report, and we learned a lot of lessons from 9/11, and our country has been safer thanks to it. This January 6th attack on the Capitol experience should be no different.
Now let's get into the bread and butter of today's event, diversity. While bipartisanship has decreased clearly since you left, diversity in Congress, especially in the House, has increased in both parties. And you see, Democrats are very explicit about choosing diverse candidates. Republicans are not so explicit. Some criticize that as a lack of transparency, and some laud that as sort of a more organic process, may the best candidate win. But the reality is today, Republicans and Democrats both have more Hispanics in the House than they ever had before, have more women. There are more. There's about the black members have plateaued, but it's a large number. There is a large black representation in both houses, well, especially in the House. What system is better? The Democratic approach of doing it sort of explicitly, or the Republican approach of sort of letting competition win the day?
Well, Rafael, look, I think you should always want the best candidate to win, right? The person who could best represent any district. However, a lot of Republicans are explicit and open about recruiting minority candidates. Elise Stefanik, for example, went out of her way to make sure there were women Republicans running in districts all over the country. Here in South Florida, we got a new Latina Republican in Maria Elvira Salazar, which was wonderful. Of course, other Republicans have recruited Hispanics. Others have recruited African Americans. So maybe the Republican Party isn't as loud or as explicit about this exercise, but I do think both parties are seeking to diversify, and not just by race and ethnicity, but also by age. Making sure younger people are represented in the Congress. The more representative the Congress is of the American people, the better its chances of passing the kinds of policies that the American people want. And I'll tell you, just having lived this experience, when there's an African American in the room in an important meeting, a Latino, a woman, someone from any minority community, it makes a big difference. And more perspectives are included, more ideas are debated, more factors are taken into consideration. So this is, as you said, there's so much bad news out of Congress. This is some good news that we should all celebrate.
Now, let's get into an issue that sort of ties in with diversity, and not just Latino diversity, but certainly AAPI and Black diversity as well. Immigration. You were a leader on this issue. You fought for the issue to be a topic while you were in Congress. And right now, I think I've never seen the immigration conversation be as partisan and as split as it is today. Do you think there's any way back to those big negotiations that were being had even in 2017 and 2018?
Rafael, I think the only way we can get back to that point is if members force the issue. We certainly tried in 2018. We went as far as to initiate a discharge petition process as members of the majority party. It's going to take that kind of dramatic action from members if we're going to address this issue in any meaningful way in the near future. It's not going to happen if people are just waiting around and hoping that something will be brought to the floor of the House or the Senate. Members are really going to have to do the heavy lifting of finding a compromise position and then forcing the leadership of both parties, which I tell people, it's been the leadership of both parties oftentimes that has not wanted to address immigration, leaving it to the next election so that they can use it during a campaign season. Members are really going to have to work at the rank and file level to make something happen. Otherwise, we can expect a status quo.
Right. There's a small group of Democrats who are fighting to include immigration provisions and really, that have been criticized as an amnesty by some people, and by their supporters, it seems to be sort of like a last chance at some form of immigration relief. And they seem to be fighting for that. What do you think? What's your take on whether that approach might work?
Rafael, it's pretty clear to everyone now that immigration must be done in a bipartisan manner. I mean, it's impossible to move immigration policy through reconciliation. The filibuster is not going away, at least not anytime soon. There's one way to do this, and it's by building consensus. And there are Republicans in both the House and the Senate who are willing to work with Democrats. I mean, I remind people in 2018, the best thing that came out of our discharge petition exercise and the subsequent votes on the House floor is that we got a majority of House Republicans to vote for a path to citizenship for Dreamers, including all of the Republican leadership at the time, which a lot of those people are still there. So there is a way forward here, but it has to be bipartisan, and the leadership of both parties has to be forced to allow this issue to come to the floor of both chambers.
Congressman Curbelo, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to see you.
Good to see you again. I hope I get to see you in person soon.